Hey everyone, it's Tuesday night again. You know what that means, don't you? It's time to join Mike and Kristie for another episode of Where's My Sage? A show hosted by a psychic medium and a guy on a quest to find Bigfoot. Who would have thought? Together, they will take you on all sorts of adventures, and not with lots of different people. Kristie even gives readings. It's time to sit back, get up and get ready. You can't sample the universe sitting down. Your hosts are waiting. Come on, let's go!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Where's My Sage? I'm Mike with my wonderful co-host, Kristie London. How are you doing this evening, Kristie?
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm well. How are you?
Good. Managed to drag you into 2 shows on a weekend, and folks are starting to come on in. So
on a weekend?
It's how my day is going.
We're going to start already, huh? I don't want to hear it. Yeah. I'm tired, too.
No, it's the way we're rocking. So
hey, it's all right.
We're going to get things out here. We got an amazing guest tonight, and I think that's why my brain is completely spinning around. We're going to get the buttons out of the way first. As folks are tuning in, please like, share, subscribe, hit those buttons. We are coming to you tonight from Where's My Sage on YouTube and Facebook. We're coming at you from Kristie London's page on YouTube and Facebook. We are also coming to you from Where's My Sage on Twitter. And, of course, Tactical Bigfoot Research on Facebook and YouTube. And as folks come in, we'll say a couple of hellos as folks is going through. And hi, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
And Larson's here. So, Matt, the guys at work, when I wasn't paying attention today, pulled up your interview with me down there in Florida. It was kind of interesting not paying attention to my voice at work. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Rhonda. So everybody's coming in from all different places. Matt says he can take over if you want to get rid of me. He is a professional journalist. He would probably do much better on this end.
Still waiting for my invite to Florida, okay? Still waiting for it. So far, it's been all the boys trips.
It'll be
you guys
crazy.
All just leave me on everything. So here I am.
Hey, Nate.
Hey, Nate, what's going on?
So what do you got coming up for adventures? What's new going that way? Anything?
Probably.
Nothing you can talk about right now?
Yeah. Well, I'm doing the thing in Caledonia in July.
Okay. Yes.
And that's already, it's out there. Like it's, the tickets are on sale. Hi, Michelle. Yeah.
Drop me that link in there. So Kristie's doing a reading back in Caledonia, New York, and I can't think of the name of the building, but it's where we did Rochester Parafest. She'll be there on the 29th of July.
The building is gorgeous, and it's historical, and it's just it's a really cool building. It's going to be fun. Yeah.
And now I gotta watch my language. Not that I wasn't going to have to watch my language for our guest this evening, but Chris is here. And
we miss you.
Yes.
Oh,
drove through that area. There's your invite. You can stay in the Airstream. Matt's got that whole redone Airstream. Man,
yes.
Maybe I should drink something different than water tonight. But you got that. I'm there the 22nd with Joe Schneider there, the Bigfoot atheist. I think that's Matt. That's what he's going by this week. But
that's right.
Joe's down the street. He actually took me to his sighting location, so we're going to work some of those color things. He doesn't know it yet, but he's going to find out. But I'm looking at Matt's stuff. Joe's stuff is great.
And we're going in a couple weeks. Oh my God, a couple weeks. We're going to Ohio.
Yes, we're going to Ohio with Tommy's crew. We're going to do a live investigation out there.
Yeah. It's an old elementary school. Oh, I can't wait. Cannot wait to get in there. It looks
public or Catholic? There's the man.
I think it's.
All right.
Hey, Joe.
Wait, start over. I just got here. I just said you and I are doing a presentation in Caledonia in a couple weeks. So,
dude, I can't remember what I did 2 minutes ago. Come on, you gotta be with us here.
Yes, our poor guest tonight. At least he's had enough conversations with me over the last couple of years to know how I can't talk right. Yeah. Rhonda wants to go to Ohio with us.
Ooh, Rhonda.
Yep. We got an
Ooh.
upcoming moose trip coming, and they had sightings in the area where we missed them. And let's see, tomorrow night I'm on Night Callers Radio, 7:30 Central, or 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern.
Yes.
Yeah, spun around. So I'm gonna talk to Lauren over there. Yeah, we've just been busy. We've just been everywhere lately and bouncing around.
I do have something really freaking cool in the works, but I can't say anything yet, and it's going to be a while. But I am super excited because things are already starting to be put out there about it, and but I can't let on that I'm involved with whatever this might be. So, but I can't freaking wait. What?
I was going to say, just so if you miss anything, go to your favorite podcast locations or our YouTube channels. Where's My Sage, Kristie London, or Tactical Bigfoot Research for the replays if you're a fan on channels. So we've got folks in here. We've got a great guest tonight. Yeah. And he has been busy because he's been on everybody's podcasts and stuff like that.
And you've been talking about him since you got back from Monster Fest, so I can't wait to talk with him.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you might be fangirling over some of these people a little bit.
We get things.
I think it's awesome.
Joe, I am not bringing up. Well, yeah, I will bring a PowerPoint, but we're going to talk before I totally get you there. Your Jeep's cool. Got cooler stickers than mine Jeep does. So, hi, Brian. So our guest this evening, if he's ready, if he can give me the thumbs up, is Darby Orcutt. I messed up everybody's name. So I'm even I had this whole thing written out for proper thing, and here's my buddy Darby. He's here with us, and I've messed up everybody's name. How many times have I talked to you once a week, at least? Here, Duba, text message.
It is completely fine, McAnnie.
Yep. Hey, you are now in the ranks of Clef Berkman, not Cliff. Clef.
Oh yes, that's right.
While I was in Ohio.
Right.
And Jake is not here from Wisconsin. So
yes. Yeah. Welcome, Darby. It's nice to meet you.
Great to meet you, Kristie.
Thanks for joining us. I'll just get Mike right. I'll help the poor guy out because if he gets any rudder, he's gonna.
Larson says he can come and help out. I can take over my computer. I'll send it.
All right.
Oh my God. You'd probably get a better investigative journalist working too. Oh God. So Darby. We yanked you on here. I know your little stuff here, but tell me what you do for a living or where you're from, because I went through and wrote down the wrong place 5 times, and I've been correcting everybody, and I've been correcting myself too.
Well, that's all right. It wasn't completely your fault. You made me realize, looking at my website, that my web guy changed my university name to another one without by accident himself.
Who pays more?
We're gonna get that fixed. But again, my name is Darby Orcutt. I am on faculty at North Carolina State University. My primary faculty appointment is as a librarian, where I am assistant head for collections and research strategy. The main thing that I do as a librarian, though, is not something that you would think of as library work, but I work supporting interdisciplinary research. I put together research teams that cross all kinds of diverse fields in order to solve really thorny real-world issues. And so that was part of the background that I brought applying when I first got interested in looking into strange things, and particularly into the Sasquatch phenomenon. That's figuring out what is going on there is a really thorny issue. And really requires taking perspectives from a lot of different fields, and so that background has been really useful. I also hold various affiliate faculty appointments with our artificial intelligence and society group, with our genetic engineering and society center, and I teach in our science, technology, and society program. And so I'm all over the map. I'm highly interdisciplinary, and I'm engaged in a lot of really interesting work that crosses just about every area that you can imagine.
Wow. What kind of, was going back to your job at the university, what kinds of different situations and things do you actually try to figure out? Like, can you talk about that or no?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's a little bit of everything. And like I say, what I do is I work to help put these teams together, to help find funding, to help support them. I do a lot of translation work across fields.
Okay.
So, for example, I do work where I have computer scientists, civil engineers, and philosophers collaborating, and they need to understand one another's language, and so that takes a bit of bridging to get those folks working together. And so I work on anything, all sorts of interesting things, anything from just very recently, I've been part of giving a response to the federal government with regard to artificial intelligence regulation. That was just this week. We submitted that. A month ago, I was working on plans to deploy sensors in coastal forests in order to monitor forest health and to be able to create a sustainable ecosystem that would hold carbon, which is very important in thinking about climate change, and particularly sea level rise in coastal areas, which are threatening those coastal forests. You name it, I've probably worked on something.
Okay.
Any of these thorny issues, I'm trying to figure out who are the folks that we need to bring together in order to address them.
So you're the network, you're the glue guy, and I apologize for laughing. All I can see is that Mel Brooks scene with the stand-up philosopher when you said that, and I'm just, history of the world there. Let's see. Matt thinks, I think they're doing Forest Park thing here in Florida. I remember hearing of those sensors. Are they down there in Florida that you know of?
It wouldn't surprise me a single bit. I would be surprised if they weren't.
Interesting.
Now I'm going to wrap us back to the Bigfoot thing, but you're interested in the paranormal as well, correct?
I am, and it was actually my work with putting together these interdisciplinary research teams that led me to my interest in all kinds of strange things. I was working quite a few years ago, and I can completely talk about this because this is all public information. But the university had been invited by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, to submit a pre-proposal for a particular technology that they wanted us to develop. And this was many years ago now, so it may not sound as strange now as it did then to the general public. But what they wanted was a no larger than 1 cubic centimeter microchip that could be implanted in the human brain, that could read and write to the brain. And so here I was helping bring together this team, and I'm sitting in a room of 6 or 8 of us. I've got a biomedical engineer, I've got an electrical engineer, I've got a design specialist, psychologist, psychology researcher, a number of other things. And I had this moment of feeling, one, like I was in a science fiction movie, because I knew that while we're sitting here taking this thing seriously within this room, probably even at that time, probably most of my colleagues at the university would have thought this was something very, very strange. And certainly the general public at that time would have said, oh, maybe this is even impossible to really think about. We think of our minds as, our own. Nobody can put information in or take information out directly. But it was really interesting to me because I had this moment of thinking also about, here we are at an elite science and engineering university, and we are thinking about how to accomplish telepathy through technology. And yet, I was at that time only somewhat aware that there were people called parapsychologists who were looking into natural means for telepathy and somehow considered outside of mainstream science. And it struck me as an interesting question. Why would that be? Why can we essentially ask the same question with a technological solution and it's, wow, this is cutting edge science. If you ask if there could be a natural mechanism for this, that's somehow pseudoscience or fringe science or whatever. It seemed a really interesting question to me. It still seems a very interesting question to me. And I had been teaching for many years about how science works, not just in its ideal form, but how it works culturally, institutionally, and I thought, this is a really interesting way to think about those questions. Let me look into some of these fringe science fields. Let me look into these areas with, strange things that people are attempting to study scientifically. And I ended up building a course around this. So I teach a course, and hey, I named it so the students would come. It's called Science, Sci, Sasquatch, and Spirits.
That's cool.
And that's pretty cool.
We look into all sorts of strange ideas, not just claims, but potential evidence. And we use this as a lens into how science defines itself, how its institutions function. And I haven't been afraid to ask these questions of where should we perhaps draw the boundaries? Are we drawing them in the right ways and in the right places? And so it's a very fun course to teach. It's a course that the students really love and engage with. And it's led me also to working in some really interesting areas, putting together some research projects, some collaborative and interdisciplinary research projects that take very serious inquiry into areas that you just don't find that in very often.
Do you find your students changing majors after taking that class or expanding, what they're doing? Because it sounds like you almost pick other, disciplines once you're like, hey, this is what I want to go to school, but there's so much other stuff I could bring to that.
Well, that's the idea. And we're hoping that'll happen in the future. Up until now, however, unfortunately, the last couple of times I've offered the course, it has filled so quickly that only the seniors who have priority for registration have been able to get a seat. So it's too late for them to change their majors in their last semester, but it's certainly been something they've really appreciated the course. But what I'm doing, what I'm in the process of doing, I just taught the course in the spring. I'm getting ready to teach it again this fall, is that I've worked with the department to to greatly expand the class and have a lot more students, and also to hold at least half of those seats for underclassmen, because that's what I really want to do and that's why I teach it, as I mentioned, in the science, technology, and society program. And it showcases in many ways a lot of the various ways that you think within the science, technology, and society major, which is to really think about not just the technical aspects of science, not just to learn the scientific theory, but to learn something of the history, the philosophy, the regulatory environment, all of the cultural aspects, the social aspects of science that have a tremendous impact on how science is done, what science is done, and what happens with the results.
What kind of backlash do you get from this? Have you received any? And what kind of students do you receive? People, or do you have people sign up that are skeptical, that are there to challenge the whole concept, or what have you?
Yeah, well, I do have. I've had a mix of students. I've had. I would say that I've had a few real hardcore skeptical students and a few real anything paranormal is fantastic students.
Those are my kind of students. I mean,
but I would say that,
yeah.
I mean, I would say that mostly, and I've been really happy. Mostly, I've drawn the curious. I've drawn students who are fairly middle of the road in terms of the ways they think about these things, and students who have an open mind and are willing to consider both creative and critical perspectives towards the subjects. I have to say I really haven't had too much backlash. I've actually had an awful lot of support. The university has, it's the course is approved. It's a full permanent course now. I've had I had one person through the approval process who seemed to be highly skeptical.
That's good. That's
that this should be a course, but that was fine. Yeah, I mean, more than anything, I think I've had. I mean, part of that is that the way that I teach the course, it isn't a, let's blindly accept any strange idea that comes along.
Right.
One of the things that I do is distinguish very carefully in my own work and when I talk about these things that, because I think that a lot of the, I guess you'd say the capital S skeptical community focuses on critique of paranormal ideas, which is fine. We should be critical of paranormal ideas. But unfortunately, I think the nuance that they miss is that even though people may promote strange ideas, they may promote ideas that are not fully baked or perhaps even sometimes baked at all, they're embedded in that the questions that people have, the questions that people are trying to answer with these ideas are rooted in experiences that people have. They're rooted in things that people see, that they hear, that they experience.
Right.
And in some cases, these phenomena are things that people have been reporting, for thousands of years. And so to not take those questions seriously seems just strange to me. So I think there's a difference between investigating these areas scientifically, being interested in exploring them. That is not something that I think you should be, that people should shun. I mean, we have to face the questions that people have.
Right.
And I think, scientists have not always been open to that in certain areas. And I get it, because sometimes it's hard. I mean, sometimes it's hard to separate the ideas or the theories that people put forward from the questions that they have.
Sure.
But that's what you have to do if you're going to try to understand these things through a scientific lens.
Right.
Do you have a lab component part of the class at all?
It's funny because I talk about the class as being kind of like a lab class, because we do a lot of lab things. One of the things that we do is we actually, I have the students build their own EMF meters, electromagnetic field meters, from scratch. So they have the opportunity to see what goes into that, to understand how an EMF meter works, what it measures, how it measures, on what scale. And that's really important for thinking about how you consider the pop culture idea that, a change in EMF equals a ghost, which is one of these, again, is one of these ideas that we have in popular culture. It's something you see on television, and yet that is a largely uninvestigated question as to whether what EMF changes even might mean, let alone do they connect to some idea that could be construed as a ghost, which is a
whole nother ballgame.
Ghost is not something that you can even define scientifically. That's kind of a catch-all for a lot of ideas. So we try to really unpack that. And we do actually go out in the field. I've taken students on ghost hunts. I have I have a project where the students actually do take environmental readings in purportedly haunted sites and non-haunted sites, to compare those readings and start to build an idea of, are there differences? Because that, to say that a particular environmental changes are connected with a haunting experience is, to claim that, you'd have to really understand what environmental changes happen in normal environments. And that's largely undocumented. So you don't even know.
So there's a question from Matt from Florida. How effective would an EMF meter be if used in the Florida swamp? And what does a spike to 15 to 30 or so mean? I know there's a couple of guys down there that are starting to use things down in Florida. So I'm going to leave that up there just so it's easier to.
That's a very long question. We could probably spend the rest of the interview on that, but I'll give a short answer. I mean, what the biggest thing is, it really depends on what EMF meter you're using, and whether you understand how to use it and what it's measuring. Most of what you see deployed in media ghost hunting are very simple EMF meters. They're K2 meters or something like that. Those meters, they only measure, let's put it this way. There's three components to an EMF field, and those meters only measure one of them. They also only measure within the scale of essentially of household wiring, because they're intended as tools to find problems with wiring in a house. Also, you'll often see on the ghost shows on television, they'll be waving them around, and if you actually read the instructions, it'll say you have to hold it still in order to get an accurate reading. If you wave it around, of course, it's going to light up or register something different. And actually, because it's only measuring, one of these aspects of an EMF field, even turning it slightly can change what you're measuring. So again, it's very complicated, but if you really look into what EMF is, and you really you read that instruction book for the meter, most people who do any kind of scientific work with an EMF meter certainly work with one that with a tri-field type meter, so it would catch all three of those aspects of the field. And again, it depends on if you're in the swamp, where you're not going to be likely to be encountering wiring or human produced EMF, then you probably are going to be wanting to use something that's called like a natural EMF meter that is actually calibrated to a completely different part of the scale, part of the spectrum, where you will be able to determine what's a natural EMF field. It's very there's a lot that goes into it. Like I say, that's the really short synopsis. But the trouble is that most people who are out in the field trying to use EMF really have no idea what it is that they're measuring. And so that's why I really try to get the students to get an understanding of, where are they measuring within the frequency spectrum. What does the instrument do? How does it work? And that's to even get to the point where you can take an accurate measurement, let alone know what that measurement might possibly mean. And again, we don't have a lot of data for that period in any field to know how common EMF changes are, and in what sorts of contexts do they normally occur. So if you don't know what's normal, it's really hard to know what's not normal.
So I have two questions. One, have you ever brought in a psychic or a medium especially to work with your students and help maybe do some experiments? And two, when you bring your students on these ghost hunts, right, these investigations to these haunted locations, how are you conducting the investigations, and what exactly are you doing when you bring them there?
Great questions. The answer to your first question is yes. I have brought a psychic medium into my class before. Okay. And I think I will probably do that again. It's hard to, I have the biggest problem I have with the class is there's so much content I could possibly cover. Mm-hmm. And cramming it all in is so difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I have done that. I did do that in an earlier semester, and I think it was an interesting experience. And I think that while it wasn't it didn't end up being like a watershed moment. I think it was really interesting for the students to see the culture of mediumship, if you will. And I think that was something to see, that the ways in which one thinks and speaks within a scientific environment is quite different than the ways that most mediums converse and think and talk about what they do. And it's, I think it's one of the things that I hope to do in the future is I have a friend who's a psychic medium, but who also is very conversant with the science of parapsychology. And so I'm hoping in the future to be able to draw on him and try to bridge that a little bit more, because I think that's one of the things that's to my mind that's really interesting, is not so much even the phenomenon of mediumship, but just the way that it represents such a very different worldview than a scientific worldview. But that doesn't mean that it's an incompatible worldview.
Interesting. So what about when you bring your students on these investigations?
Yeah, well, the investigations are, not true investigations in the sense, I mean, we do go out and do what we do, but I have so many students, there's no way that they're not, tripping over each other. And, it's very difficult to know, like, to stop and listen and know that, oh, I heard that, and not know that it wasn't one of the, 20 some odd other students who are traipsing around right now. But it's good enough for them to sort of have an experience of it, and to sort of understand like what goes on in an investigation, even though it's a model rather than any sort of real investigation.
Sure, I understand that. So, but do you just kind of go to this place and say, okay, here, go ahead and explore. This is what we're looking for. Try this, try that. Is that basically what happens?
I'm changing actually the way that I do that. I'm constantly evolving the course. I have done something similar to that a couple of times in the past, where I've had the students go on sort of a traditional, almost like the type of ghost hunt that you'd see on television, to sort of have that experience, to critique that experience.
Maybe like with a guide and tour.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody who knows the building or the place.
Yes, absolutely. And again, that's a really interesting experience for the students. I heard you in the intro mentioning an elementary school. We actually went to a retired elementary school that was purportedly haunted, and that was an interesting experience. And it was actually very hilarious too, because what we didn't realize, the students didn't realize, was that there was one wing of that elementary school that had been renovated and was being used as a community center. And so while we were in sort of the abandoned, like completely hellishly looking wing, some of the students,
cool part of the building.
some of the students had wandered off and actually found the community center part, and this small group came back, and this one young one was telling the story. She's like, yes, we were there, and we walked into this area, and it was a big like presentation area with a stage, and then we heard a voice behind us, and we looked, and there was a little girl sitting there. And, they proceed to tell about this conversation they had with a little girl, this little girl. And my other students are like rapt. They're like, what? And you heard what? You heard what? Yeah. And then at some point, the students who'd gone off into the community center and come back realized that the other students didn't know that that existed. And so she stopped. She's like, no. It was a real little girl. Like there were people there. There was something going on. We were talking with this real little girl. And it was like, she's like, I can't believe I'm having to say this, but I guess so. Here we are in this moment.
That's funny.
They're all trying to talk to ghosts. And
I mean, you never know. I mean, honestly.
Everybody that's popping in, please like, share, subscribe. Hello for the old timers that are coming back. I see some old face popping into the chat. Darby's with us tonight. We got him on the paranormal thing, and now we're gonna kind of drag him towards that big furry creature of Bigfoot. And but just thinking about your students, even though you're doing that science stuff, do you have an architecture program at the university or no?
Oh, we do. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're going to study these old buildings and everything like that, I mean, that's one thing we've noticed going to different places like Mansfield Prison, where they still do weddings in the old, dining hall and stuff because the marble. I mean, there's a prison. You're getting married in a prison. What? Because of the architecture.
Super cool.
Right. And it's just thinking about that kind of thing. Yeah. So now you've got the paranormal, you're working this. Now comes that big furry guy or girl or whatever. We don't know what it is. How do you get involved with the Squatch?
Yeah. So it was one of those things where when I first started developing the course, having an interest in this area and, thought, I mean, like I say, I mean, I thought initially, hey, this would be a great way to teach how science works in the real world. And it's proven a wonderful way to teach that.
I'm carried in popping, yeah.
And yeah, and so obviously the Sasquatch phenomenon is one of those big ones. And I think that it gives a different perspective, and it offers a different set of issues and a different set of things to consider than thinking about ghosts or mediums or psychic powers or what have you. And in fact, I mean, I'm sure as you say that there are lots of folks, I mean, all the time. I'll meet folks who are, really interested in psychic medium stuff, and they think the Bigfoot stuff is silly. How could anybody believe that? And you meet Bigfoot people who are like all about Bigfoot, and oh my gosh, this must be out there, and the idea that mind reading could happen. No, that's ridiculous. So you have a lot of these different areas, I of course I have my own questions about all of these things because they are, these are, human experiences that people have. And the Sasquatch phenomenon is really interesting because there is also, in a way that there isn't in some of these other fields, there's more trace evidence. There is some alleged physical evidence, and of course, a consistency to reports that is greater than. Like I never, I at first didn't, and I still haven't dealt a whole lot in the class with like the UFO phenomena because it seems so diverse to me. At least initially, it seemed so diverse. So some people see flying saucers, some people see little green men, some people see cigar shapes. At least when you're talking about the Sasquatch phenomenon, you don't have some people saying, "Oh, it was big and hairy," and others saying it was tiny and bald. So there's at least an idea that maybe there's an underlying reality. Or at least some shared reality that people are experiencing. So it was one of the phenomena that I really knew that I wanted to cover in the course. And so I had to really, I had to read up on it. I spent a lot of time actually going out with amateur Bigfoot investigators in the field to see what they do, see what, particularly those who were taking, so they were taking scientific approaches to see if that, to what extent was that indeed the case, and what did that mean for them, and how did they go about observing and documenting what it was that they observed and documented. It was really, and I know I've mentioned to you, Mike, one of the folks that I met along the way, unfortunately never met in person, but I became very fast friends with over the telephone, was the late Dr. John Bindernagel, who was a wildlife biologist, Canadian wildlife biologist, and one of few folks with a relevant PhD who took the phenomenon very seriously. And it was interesting because John had written a book, his second book, called The Discovery of the Sasquatch, where he had, after years as a wildlife biologist trying to get his field to look at potential evidence and finding that very difficult, to even have it looked at, examined by scientists. In that book, he worked that out. He got into issues of the history, the philosophy of science, the culture of science, as a way to understand for himself why he was having such a tough time making this case. When I met him, it was after I'd taught the course. I think I taught the course once at that point. I was getting set to teach it again the next year. And we used to laugh because I had come to the Sasquatch phenomenon from the other angle, which was I was very engaged with trying to teach and explain the history, the philosophy, the culture, and how that impacts scientific practice. And that had got me interested in the Sasquatch. So here we were coming, essentially to a very similar place, but from completely opposite directions. And that was something that was really neat. And it was first, and actually it was first in talking to him. He was the first one that I shared with my plans, which took years to come to the point where they are now, to actually wrap true, top-notch scientific work into to bring those scientists in a way that could hopefully give us some real insight into the Sasquatch question. And that's where I am now with the DNA study.
And that's just that's I knew we'd be able to wrap it right into there. So you took from A to B to C, and now in the last couple of weeks you've managed to come out. And what have you done with your networking? And then you do have some questions in there, Denise. I'm going to get to your question, and then I got one that's kind of running in the back of my mind on the clickbait thing, with your background as a librarian. But so you've had your class, you got your thing. Now we're here. What about this DNA? What are we doing with DNA?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that struck me was that there have been a number of reports, certainly a number of claims over many, many years from investigators and experience of Sasquatch, that they say, oh well, at the place where this happened, I found this hair, and this hair looks unusual, or what have you. And I had been asked by a number of investigators over the years, where do I send this to get tested? I've got this. And I actually looked into that. I looked into a lot of the commercial labs, the work that they do. I looked into how they did it and how professionally they did it. And I really found that I wasn't able to make a recommendation to anyone. Because I wasn't convinced from what I'd seen of the few commercial lab reports that have been shared with me and such. I wasn't convinced that if there were something truly unique there, that those commercial labs would even necessarily notice or care. And I say that because I had seen a number of a small number of reports where the labs had obviously given an answer, but not necessarily. It seemed that they had been more than happy to take someone's money and to give them an answer. Let me put it that way. And unfortunately, particularly when you're talking about something that would be, if Bigfoot exists, and if Bigfoot is, if somebody has a sample of that, that would be monumental. And so you really need to be able to trust that and to have a credible place to take a look at that. And unfortunately, there really have been very few opportunities over the years for folks who had such samples to even potentially have them looked at by somebody who was credible in the sense that they could do the work and you could rely on the results. So that was one problem that I was determined to fix. And I knew from my work with, putting together different teams, and this is what I had talked about with John Bendernagel, where, and that he was really intrigued by this, and he would have loved to have seen this come together. I know, but my idea was this: from years of putting together teams, I always recognized that when you bring together these experts from these different domains, you need to have a project that has multiple outcomes, and particularly that has outcomes that address the needs of the research agenda of each individual participant. And those agendas are very, very different. So with this study, for example, I am interested in the Sasquatch phenomenon. I'm the only one of my collaborators who's interested in the Sasquatch phenomenon. My other collaborators all bring interest in other things, in developing new forensic techniques, in training PhD students, into looking into true unknowns, which is something that they rarely get to do. They rarely look at something that, usually when they're doing particularly genetic analysis of something, they know what it is they're looking at, and they're looking at maybe a small unknown about some particular aspect of it. But this is wonderful training for them to be able to look at something that they don't know necessarily what it is heading in, and they have to figure that out from scratch. And I'm working with a really top-notch microscopist that I found kind of late in the game, and working with him on developing forensic techniques as well as. I'm sorry.
She's got a question.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I want to be able to understand the rest of what you're saying, and I don't know what that is.
He works with viewing things through a microscope.
Okay, thank you.
He looks at very small things.
Those are the people down the hall from you at work, Kristie.
Listen. Thank you. Now I can understand the rest of what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But actually, he looks at, he actually does. Okay. Here's the thing. He actually looks under the microscope and looks at things to the molecular level. Okay. So he looks at molecules, things as small as molecules. And so I actually met him through our mutual interest in artificial intelligence, because he's using artificial intelligence to find certain things in the.
That wasn't very nice, Matt.
So he's using artificial intelligence to look at lots and lots and lots of images to find the very small pieces in there that he's looking for, and so forth. And so I have some ideas about how we might do some things with that. So the idea is that there are all these other possible outcomes apart from my interest in seeing these unusual samples looked at. There's all sorts of other interests, and so the way to put together a really successful interdisciplinary collaboration is to make sure that make sure that it's doing something for all participants.
That's awesome. I mean, just to take all those different disciplines, to put them together, and it's just not blinders on, we're looking for X.
Right.
What the whole benefit, not, and you've heard me preach about both of you, and most of our audience has, and Central Florida for Bigfoot's my buddy Matt. That's who I do a lot of stuff with. And usually Matt's the one that gets stuck when I go, hey, here's a new app. Here's a new 3D scanner. Here's something. And he's the guy that throws me all the camera stuff. Is our research into this topic brings us so much other, so many other disciplines. When you and I started talking, back in the day, hey, did you talk to somebody, a primatologist on Soloris, or those primitive aspects? And then here, I'm doing this stuff with Doug, and who knows what might happen with this UV thing. Probably not much of anything, but we're going to collect a whole bunch of hair in the process and take a look at it. And if we get something that passed, but we're going to have known samples that I can hand over to you. And that's, not to drag you through, because I know you had a long week, is somebody does have something. Matt said, he's got a friend or acquaintance, Tim T, that we know, and Tim's been on the show with us. He's got a bunch of samples. Is the study open? I know right now you're working on some of the processes and stuff.
The study is open.
We know.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know I shared the link for the initial intake survey with you. Is that something if you could drop that in the show notes, or go ahead and drop that in there? I will
work on getting that into the show notes again. I've got it in text message.
All right.
So I will get it over to the other side of the house here. I'm using I'm on my remote computer instead of my regular computer, because nobody's watching the dogs tonight.
Excuses.
But if somebody does have a hair, I've gone through this, but now we actually have lots of folks listening, because we've got the paranormal thing going, we got this going. How do you want it packaged? I mean, I know I do it all the time, but for you in the lab, people know when I go out to different things, I bring kits and I hand them kits. Here's all the paper or whatever. And while I try to find the webs, there we go.
Well, let me make it easy for you. Let me make it easy for everybody. The survey form is online. If
I'm getting a link right now.
Somebody can reach out to me if they, if somebody doesn't do online, I'm happy to get you a print version if you need it. But I assume if they're watching this, hopefully they're online in some way. The survey's online. You can just fill that out. And don't stress about it. If there's a question you're not sure how to answer, don't worry about it. Take your best stab at it, because it's what that initial survey is meant to do is just for us to know who has samples to offer, kind of what kind of samples they are. Tell us a little bit about the context of them, why you think they're interesting or unusual, and tell us something about how they've been collected and stored. And again, don't fret if you haven't collected and stored them and using the best forensic techniques. Don't worry about that, because crime scene investigators all the time have to work with crime scenes that are less than perfect. That's what a lot of forensic work is about. So
there's your sample form there.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, and you can drop the URL for that in there so that folks have it.
URL is dropped down on all of them. And there we go. For those folks listening on StreamYard or Spotify or whatever, just go to our YouTube channel at Where's My Sage or Tactical Bigfoot Research, and the link will be in the notes there.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah.
So what will happen is that folks will fill this out at some point with these. We're going to use this to prioritize. That doesn't mean that, if you don't hear back right away, it doesn't mean we're not going to look at your sample or we don't want it. It just means that, we're human. We have only a certain amount of bandwidth, and it'll depend on, what the flow of offers of samples coming in is. What will happen in these cases, we'll use this to do an initial prioritization based on what we think might hopefully yield an interesting result. A lot of that calculation will depend on the age of the sample, the circumstances in which it's been found and stored, because DNA does tend to degrade. And so if somebody says, "Hey, I've had this sample for 30 years and I've kept it out in my garage and it gets 100 degrees in the summer every summer, and it's been in a plastic bag sealed up, then we're unlikely to be able to get DNA from that. We may eventually want to try if it's unusual enough, but we're probably going to be looking at first for samples that we think are more likely to yield interesting results. I'll be following this up in those cases with an interview with folks, so reaching out and either online like this, or through a teleconferencing or by phone to learn a little bit more. So if if you're not sure how to answer some of these questions, you'll have plenty of opportunity later to explain explain things. And then from there, at that point, if we are prioritizing, your sample, then we're going to reach out, and that's when we'll tell you how to package that up, where to send it. We're not putting the address out there because we don't want unsolicited samples. I know that Jeff Meldrum's told me a story of receiving a box of poop with no return address. It was just in the cardboard.
Come on.
You have no idea who sent it, anything like that. Don't want that. We want to know what's going on.
Spending quite a few days with him, I could just imagine his face when that happened.
Oh my God.
It just went straight in the trash. But,
we got to send him some Cuba cheese.
Yeah.
But so yeah,
wow.
so you'll get the instructions on that. I mean, I think that honestly, Mike, I think you're eminently qualified to to explain to folks how, if they find samples in the future, whether it's next week or next month or whatever, uh, uh, you're eminently qualified to be able to tell folks, what are good practices for, how to collect those samples, how to store them. I think the most important thing is people do tend to like to stick things in plastic baggies and seal them up. And that is about the worst thing you can do for a potential DNA sample, because any moisture that's in there, anything it doesn't breathe, and it will just degrade that DNA very, very quickly.
Oof.
So if you have samples, you're best off putting them in paper envelope, ideally acid free. But again, I mean, there's certainly gold standard techniques that, Mike, I know you can tell your listeners anytime, what they are. Because
we'll do a tactical Tuesday. We'll do another tactical Tuesday on that, and kind of go through the kits.
But at the same time, I don't want anybody to, I mean, if somebody plucked the hair off a Sasquatch last month and put it in a plastic bag, I don't want to say, don't submit it.
No, I mean, that's the big
funny.
thing. I mean, if you got the sandwich bag from lunch, I mean, I remember the first samples we got. That's all I had. I had a plastic bag, and we got back. We put them in right to the paper envelope, and it was making sure we had some gloves and stuff like that. If you've got a first aid kit in your bag, you probably got a pair of tweezers to pull some, a sliver out, and you got a pair of gloves. Don't waste everything in your first aid kit, but I always put extra things in the setup, so it always works. So I'm just so happy about this, knowing that there's going to be a whole nother generation of scientists that are, these kids are going to be in there working in the labs, learning something that your inspiration in doing this, like you said, doing your class and all the other scientists and stuff that's there. It's not just, sitting behind and, where AI is taking over everything.
Right.
Or,
well, you're approaching it from so many different perspectives and angles. It's not just, you're not short-sighted about it at all. You're open to any possibility, and you're willing to explore that. That's not very common, unfortunately.
So you find a new species, doesn't have to be in, our line, maybe a new bear or a new, I don't know, muskrat or something like that. Do you have a nice naming team ready to go, or I'm going to wait and see what happens there?
Well, that's something I am just starting to think about. Is it would be whatever you think the possibilities are of finding a new species through this study, whether you think they're very high or whether you think they're extremely low, it would be irresponsible for me not to be at least somewhat prepared for that possibility. So yeah, but I haven't, naming, who knows? I mean, obviously it would depend on what it is. If, and it's funny. I mean, as I told my colleagues when we first started the project, I said, here's the good news. If there is a Sasquatch species out there, an unknown species, and we find it, we're guaranteed a publication in Nature, which is the top life sciences journal. Absolutely guaranteed. So, yeah. But I mean, as far as all that, I mean, I think that it's too speculative for me now to think about naming.
So we've got some comments in there. Micah, who's coming in from, I'm going to screw it up, Amsterdam, right?
Netherlands.
Netherlands. Yep. She said she would have loved to have a teacher like this when she was in her younger days. She can type faster than me when I can get.
Like she's 80.
Yeah. And it's, it's like 4:00 in the morning. She's translating in 2 languages and still gets things out faster than I get out.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm honored that someone's up in the middle.
Netherlands. There we go. Yep. She's a diehard. It only took me. It took me almost a year to get her name down right.
I think it took you longer than a year to get her name down. You still screwed up.
Yeah.
She even spelled it phonetically for him one time, and he still screwed it up.
I have Jay's name spelled
and
phonetically.
It's just like it's just like your name, Mike. It doesn't get any easier than that. It's your name. Oh yeah. That's great. Very interesting.
It's 3:15 in the morning over there, so
yeah.
Thank you, Derek, for being on with us.
Love you. She loves listening to all of our guests and learning all about these things, and as all of our guests or all of our listeners and our viewers do. So we really appreciate that.
It's just so important to go through. So have you started receiving samples to start?
Not yet. We actually just launched the survey online a week and a half ago is when it opened.
Yeah, so I'm dropping the survey one more time in here.
So we've had a bare handful of responses thus far. Although I've heard from a number of folks that they intend to fill it out. So I hope that those folks will go ahead and do that sooner rather than later. So we're gonna we'll see from there, because we're part of our process of prioritizing things sort of requires us seeing at least a little bit of what may be coming to us. And I think that certainly at this point there are some of those folks I'm going to start reaching out to probably in the next week or so, week or two, and scheduling a time to really hear the fuller story behind it and collect some information, and then as a team we're gonna make those judgments as to which of the samples we're ready to go ahead and receive and start with first.
And folks, when you look at that, that's a huge endeavor, being able to interview and getting all that information and getting the data. Before getting the sample, you have a lot of work looking at how intense the questionnaire is. We have a mutual, acquaintance, Ryan. I know that he called me the other day because he wanted to come up with some new hair collection traps, and those will be coming pretty soon. Kristie got to go out on her first investigation with him in Western New York. That's a guy, if you get up here to New York, Darby, because we're going to get you up here to do a little research in good old Western New York. He's really been working on building some serious traps. And the last 3 mornings I woke up to trail cam footage, of some awesome animals.
So cute.
Nothing there, but Rise got me there. It's awesome to know that you guys are doing this. What else would you like folks to know about, in this research, in the plans and direction? And Matt was inquiring, how long will the study be open? The thing is, you and I've had lots of conversations, probably once every other week, for a couple hours. And we have some friends that we do a lot of other talks with. Where could we get that? Where are we going with it?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I've had a number of folks ask, when are you going to stop? I'm like, well, we've just started, we've just launched, so we haven't, we haven't put a parameter out. Now, I understand that, it's not uncommon. Some studies are very limited in scope. This is an exploratory study. We're not putting strict limits on it at this time. I know, for example, like, I was just being asked today by somebody about the Brian Sykes study, which was a little over a decade ago now. And, when Brian Sykes went into his study, he had a very strict limit on the numbers that he was going to look at. And he looked at, I don't know, I think it was only like 6 or 8 samples from North America. So out of everything that was offered, he chose, I think he chose about 15 and then narrowed that down to about 6 or 8 that he actually really investigated. We're not doing that. We are really truly interested in looking at as many samples as are interesting and that we can, at least for as long as it makes sense to do so. So we're open-ended right now in terms of this. I say that not to say, hey, if you have a sample, wait a year and submit it then. We may not be taking samples in a year. Right. I don't know. If you have a sample now that you think is an interesting sample, you need to go ahead and offer it right away. But again, we don't have a particular cutoff date. Now, I do think that there will, some of that will depend on the results that we're getting. And we're not at this point setting out to test the null hypothesis per se. But certainly there is the possibility that, if we look at how many samples that we look at, that they, if they're all coming back as known species, no matter how unusual in appearance, no matter how unusual the reported context of finding them or what was going along with that. But if they're all coming back as known species, at some point, my colleagues are going to say, should we really be continuing to invest our time in this?
Well, and you've got a cost too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a cost to this. And I think, it's funny. You mentioned your friend Ryan up there that I had a conversation with a while back, and I kind of half joked to him, but I was very serious that there have been folks who have in the past donated to research in this area, and in some cases $500,000 or something like that at a time. And I joked, but I was very serious. If I through the university were given $500,000 or even approximating that, I could have this set up as a permanent research program where we could always look at strange samples. I've talked about that with my colleagues. There is that value again in training PhD students and looking at unknowns. If somebody came along and said, here's $500,000, what I would plan at this point to do would be to put that in an endowment, to take the interest that comes off each year and use that to support a PhD student in genetics, and to have that ongoing program so that this type of testing would be available to the public on a perpetual basis. And I think that would be really remarkable, because the things that could potentially be learned by looking at unusual things, again, that's not something that a university or any research institute is going to do on pure spec. But if there were that sort of funding, we'd do that. So I know some people have been asking, because I think some people have been asking me, how can I contribute to this, because they're excited about this project going on. I'm not requiring, there's no requirement to donate at all. But if people are interested, I do have a link. I've worked in.
Okay.
That's another way that the university has actually supported me very strongly, because
That's wonderful.
not everybody, and you can talk to my colleagues, not everybody gets a gift account. There's a certain administrative cost to the university to set that up, and yet I have one established for this research area of science, society, and the strange, and so people can give tax-deductible donations to North Carolina State University, earmarked for this type of work.
Okay.
Please email that link again. I mean, to hear that, brother, you're a true educator, because you are trying to set up for that next generation. It's not that Texas study that we don't talk about, or psych study. Those were, or one other one that we know of, that this is blinders on. You're trying to help groom that next generation. And to hear that, yes, that graduate student is working on that, or possibly to have something for another student to continue, who knows what they might find outside of, just from the genetics end. That's amazing. I mean, that, when we set the show up, it's a taste of the universe. It's a journey. The journey that you're helping provide. When you say, you got your microscopy, okay, it's getting late. And then I'm going to follow up with a couple of comments, because I really here you got somebody that can look at something at the atom level, and you have that hair. So if it is degraded, you still have somebody else that could look at that hair and say, hey, there's something different in this. If it was something that was essentially. But,
eventually things degrade to nothing, so I can't promise
well,
that.
yeah. So, and that's the question, finding the trackway, who I got to meet, at Monster Fest, how fast does hair degrade, and is it absorbed in the soil naturally? Again, that's something. If you go look at the Body Farm stuff, they can kind of explain some of that information. Unless you got a short answer on that, Darby. I know we're kind of getting short on time for tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. It depends on the hair. It depends on the soil. It depends on the conditions. It depends on so many things.
Finding the trackway. Yeah. Go look at the blah 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 blah, the Body Farm stuff. They kind of go, there's a whole cool stuff in there. I've got the address. There we go. So here's the address to donate. So somebody that wins the lotto, please go help a college student and the study. Matt's got a good point here. This is interesting. So I wonder if all the so-called people claiming they have Bigfoot hair samples actually take advantage of this free offer, kind of put up or shut up moment. And really, you are giving a chance to all those people that have been pushing those things for years. And I'm going to reach out to Bigfoot Tom, and just got something. And then, it wouldn't be our show if we weren't a little goofy, but I got to give it to him. Finding the trackway, hair collection trap, shower drains, so you could place in the woods. Just kidding. I think he's got a point there. I'm thinking,
excuse me.
When we talk to Amy Brew the next time, ask her about the print that we found down in Pennsylvania and where it was located. It was directly looking at the outhouse where the woman's tent was and down towards the showers, Hey, put a drain in there. Maybe we'll get lucky.
Oh my goodness.
Denise, happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Denise.
Yes. Again, Darby, we appreciate you being on with us tonight. I mean, is there anything in closing that you really want to, that we missed? I mean, it's just so amazing that your university is allowing this to go on and put this for you to coordinate all these different disciplines. God, I was wishing I was going back to school again. I mean, I want to go back and finish a museum studies degree, but Matt, I think you and I need to go take this class. Is it 3 credits, 1 credit? How many credit hours? Because, I know I got to take a couple of things to finish this archaeology degree out.
If it's really that important to you, it won't matter how many credits there are. You'll just do it because it's important, right?
Yeah, well, the course it's a 3-credit hour course. I have to say, I am exploring options. In fact, I'm meeting later this month with our continuing education folks to see about the possibility of offering more of an adult education, shorter version of the course or something like that folks, because I have a lot of folks who are very interested. I don't want to it is, I think one of the things that does surprise my students with the course is that I think there are a number of them who think, oh, this looks like a lot of fun. And they always tell me at the end of the semester, yeah, this was a lot of fun, but this was a lot of work. This was,
well, it's not all fun and games.
It's a rigorous course. No, it has to be, though. And I think that's the thing that, is that these areas of inquiry are a lot of fun. They're naturally a lot of fun. People find them really fascinating and interesting.
Yeah.
But if we're really going to understand them, if we're really going to do true research in these areas, that requires some rigor and that requires some work. I find it enjoyable work, but it's work. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, my research partner, as he's out there teaching. How many nights we've been out in the woods and he's over there like, oh, I got to write a lesson plan for, next week. And it's like, okay, this is perfect. Sit with a cigar with, recorders and thermal cameras. And, he's typing away, coming up with, and is, uneducated biology me, is going, hey, what about this? And, okay, maybe a first year student might look at that, differently. So that's awesome. Wow, it's been an hour and a half. I have so much stuff.
It went so fast.
And thank you. I see that you shared the donation link.
Donation link
in the chat. Yeah. One thing I'll mention is that donation link is just a weird way the university does it. It actually resolves there are 2 options there. So make sure you choose the one that's Science Society and the Strange.
Okay.
All right. So let me hang on one second. I'm gonna show everybody quick. Wrong one. Go to the screen.
Okay.
StreamYard keeps giving me way too many options lately.
Yeah. You don't need that many buttons to play with.
All right. So sharing the screen. So you're going to get, when you go to the website there to donate, go down here and you want to pick the bottom. Let's kind of make that one bigger. So Science Society and the Strange. Click on that, folks, and we can help Darby out with this study and help out, getting some things out there. So,
and if you happen to work, the other thing that's interesting is that because we are a nonprofit and this is a tax deductible contribution, many employers will actually match contributions to the university. So if you happen to work for one of those companies, many of them are right. There's a place you can click that off right on this page and you can check, and many have that set up automatically with the university. A lot of major corporations. Some you may have to go to your corporation and say, hey, I'm giving to this, nonprofit, and they will match. But that's,
Yeah, that's
good to know.
Yeah, I don't know anywhere else that you can give to support the investigation into these areas that your employer will match it.
Yeah, I'd be very curious.
Right down on the bottom, click that and it says, go right to your, find out if your company will match. That's awesome. It's simple. It's easy. I know what I'm doing. Because if I can get more kids involved in education, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So,
well, this is one of the things that I'm very much committed to is bridging this gap between science and the public, and I think part of that is that we need to have science that's engaged in answering questions that are of interest and concern to the public. We don't need to be ignoring anything, really. And so, I think it's important that we have these kinds of connections. And so that's another, while I focus, in a lot of my professional work, I'm focused on making connections between scientists. My heart is very much with making that connection between science and the public too.
Love that.
Thanks,
Very
brother.
nice. Yeah.
Well, we're
You
at
are a great
9:30. So if you can hang out for a second in the back while I just shut things down, and we appreciate that. If you got a minute, if not, I'll talk with you later in the week. So thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much for joining us. It was a
We got
pleasure.
the
I learned a
link there.
lot.
Yes.
Thank you, Kristie.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
really
you.
nice to meet you.
You too. You too. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Darby.
All right.
In here. So, completely educational show tonight.
Yeah.
I love those. Thank you to the audience for being here. Please go over and take a look at what he's got going. The links are there. I will be putting them in the show notes for those folks listening in on Spreaker and Spotify if you're just listening on the audio. And all those other different locations, or Twitter, you can sneak over to YouTube. So I'm going to get us out. Anything else in closing? Tomorrow night, I'll be on Night Callers Radio, 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern on YouTube and Facebook. So, Kristie, anything else?
No, I'm good. I think we're good tonight. Yeah.
Good night, all.
Thank you to everybody for being here with us and for participating. We love all of you. So until next time, stay safe
and sample on.